Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Leadership Lab podcast. My name is Dina Phillips, and I'll be your host. We're back again today with Jesse McCullough and Sean Bjorndal to talk about how one learns to learn. Guys, how's it going?
Everything's good on this end, Dina. It's always a good time whenever I'm able to get together with you and Sean and talk about topics like this, which I don't know that we've spent a whole lot of time actually thinking about, and I think our conversation today is going to be quite fruitful.
Good deal. Sean, how are you doing?
Great. I'm really interested in this topic, honestly, because I have no idea where this is gonna go. But I have a feeling that Jess is gonna teach us a lot. So I'm excited to dive in on this topic today.
Yeah, same. Well, we have a great podcast planned for our listeners today. We're going to take a look at the process of learning. So, Jess, where do we start?
This is such an important thing for us to understand, and it's something that I hadn't given a whole lot of consideration to. Over the last 10 or 11 years, as I've really committed myself to the study of leadership principles, and how do you help people get from where they are to another place? There's some part of that which requires us to learn. And I've come across a couple learning models that I would like to share today. We'll start off with the first one. If we have enough time, we'll get into the second one. We'll see how the conversation goes here, of course. But there's four stages of learning that we need to understand. The first stage is the stage of ignorance or a lack of awareness. And I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of time in that stage. So when we recognize that we all start from a place of not knowing, that's such a key thing for us to recognize, both for ourselves, but also for the people on our team and then the communities where we serve. So have you ever encountered anybody that was ignorant or completely lacked awareness of what was going on?
Many times, for sure.
Yeah,
I've been there many times too.
Yes.
Sorry, Dina, go ahead.
I was just saying, mostly me, but yeah, I definitely have.
Yeah, it's such a neat thing, and if you have this model, I'm going to share a model with you today, and if you can just sort of use this as a model, you can see where people are within this process. And if we understand where people are at, that I think can help us lead them better. It can help us lead ourselves better. It can help us lead our teams better. It can help us lead the patients that we serve better. So if it's all right, I'll go ahead and I'll unpack these four parts to the learning model. And as I mentioned, the first part is just you're ignorant, or you lack awareness of what's going on. In some ways, you could say that you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know about you, but there's an awful lot of things that I don't know about. Last night, I don't know that we've shared this on the podcast, but I found myself being the president of a local nonprofit where it's the Community Revitalization Board. And one of the things that we're doing is we are hosting concerts at the theater within our community. And we had a concert last night, and one of the other members of the board is a sound technician, and she was mixing the band's sound. Now, I know there's music. I know there's music that I like. I know there's music that I dislike. But when it comes down to mixing sound, I don't have a clue. And she made a comment last night. She said, she said it was so hard. She's like, I had to change things based on whether the guitarist was picking his guitar or if he was strumming his guitar. And I didn't know that there was a difference. I thought you just played the guitar, right? And there's a key point that I want to make sure that I call out here as we talk about this stage of ignorance. As you start to move out of this stage of ignorance, you move in and you will find yourself in a place of confusion. Confusion always precedes learning. And I say that to you because I think we can find some encouragement with that. Before we hit the record button, I shared this behind the scenes, and we all agreed that we have had patients that were confused, right? Some of them more confused than others, right? But you start off in this place of ignorance, and then what we do is, as we start to teach them, as they start to learn, they move to this place of awareness. Stage number 2 is the stage of awareness, and when you find yourself in this place of awareness, this is when you realize that you now know that there's something that you don't know. Like last night, I learned more about music than I now know. There's things that I don't know about mixing sound, and so we go through this point of we find ourselves where we're now aware that, hey, this is something that we can learn, but just knowing it doesn't mean a whole lot, right? I can know that there's rocket science. That doesn't mean I can put rocket ships on the moon. And so that means that we have to, awareness is not the end point. We have to go at least to the next stage. And the next stage is the stage of competence. This is when we learn something and we get to the point where we become competent within that discipline. Right. So I was thinking about this earlier today, within mathematics, we went through the process of learning our multiplication tables or our addition facts and those different things. We went from a place of being unaware to being aware, but then with some practice, we got to the point where we became competent and we could do math pretty good. But if you keep after it long enough, you can actually get to the point where you're really good at it. And this is the level of proficiency. And so these are the 4 stages. So it's ignorance, awareness, competence, and proficiency. And as we are leading people, as we're teaching people and helping them get to these better places, we want to help them go through those stages from ignorance to awareness, from awareness to competence, from competence to proficiency. Now, I share that because I think you can look at it on 3 levels. You can look at it for yourself, right? You can look at it for your team, and you can use this as a model for the patients that you serve. Where are they at on the spectrum? So I'll pause here and just see if there's any reactions to this idea.
I like how you brought up the 3 different scenarios where it's yourself, your team, or your patients, right? Because that's very much our world as pharmacists. And and my gut reaction was going to learning how to lead, which is kind of what you want to do, Jess, what you're teaching us all to do. But it's like, how do you apply this, and how do like that's like much harder, much deeper. It's going to take a long time. But if you can break it down into chunks and learn this process and apply it to the patient's mindset first, I think that would be the easiest place to start, is learning this so you can quickly take that patient from confusion to proficient in whatever they have to do in the regimen, right? Where learning how to lead, I think that we're going to have to spend a little bit more time perfecting how we break down this learning process to get to a better leader. I don't know, that's just my gut reaction.
No, those are good insights. Dina, what about you?
Yeah, when I was listening to you kind of explain and go through the steps, my initial thought was that it's all about the comfort zone. And because if the first step to learning is confusion, you're not going to learn anything if you're always comfortable. And I can do that easily when I'm, thinking of myself and all the things where I try to push myself out of my comfort zone. But as I'm thinking about it, and as you were explaining it and to applying it to yourself and to your team and to the patients, the patients are already completely uncomfortable. They're in a world they don't know. I mean, I work at a cardiovascular hospital. So a guy, 45-year-old guy shows up at the gym, has an event there. Next thing you know, he's waking up with his chest cracked open and getting ready to go home on 9 different new medications, and that kind of thing. And he's never been on any daily meds before. So I can safely say that he's been already pushed out of his comfort zone. So sometimes we step out of our comfort zone. Sometimes we get kicked out and pushed out of our comfort zone. But I think just kind of realizing that, that first step is confusion for everyone. And I just kind of equate that to, I'm comfortable here, I'm not comfortable there. That probably means there's something on the other side of this for me. or your patient or whomever. But that just kind of struck me as a interesting way to look at it, I guess.
I think that's a brilliant observation, right? You know, how many patients do we see where when they present to us, their world has been turned upside down, right? And we've probably all had examples where you know, perhaps we gave some counseling to a patient and they misunderstood it. Maybe that's just me, but I'm going to hazard a guess that if this hasn't happened to either of you, it's probably happened to some of our listeners, where we give some counsel and then they'll call back at some point, or the next time we have an encounter with them, we find out that they didn't do exactly as they were instructed. And I want to call this out because this is a dangerous thing. Awareness does not equal proficiency. Awareness doesn't even necessarily equal competence, right? Like you can learn these things, or you can be aware. I can be aware that there's a way to mix music. I'm aware of that now. You're not going to give me the tablet and have me perfectly mix things, right? But there's a lot of folks that confuse that. And there's a lot of folks that get frustrated with that. It's like, well, I told them to do whatever, right? I told them to take the medicine this way, right? I told them to do this. I told them to do that. And it doesn't happen. And it becomes a very easy leap for a lot of people to make, that because we've made them aware that someone will behave in a proficient state. So I'll pause just to see if again, you two are much better pharmacists than what I am, so you probably haven't experienced this.
Seriously doubt that.
You probably haven't experienced this, but maybe you know somebody who has. Sean, I can see there's a story that you want to share.
Well, I don't know if this is a good story or not, but this is, I think, coming into the aware but not proficient. So when my grandpa was alive, the days he had oatmeal, he wouldn't take his Lipitor, because the oatmeal box says it lowers your cholesterol, right? So he was aware, and he wasn't ignorant. He was aware, but he wasn't proficient in how he needed to take that medication. And it wasn't until I became a pharmacy student, because my aunt was a nurse, and she tried telling him that he wasn't listening to her. But I had a different, I had a different relationship with him, that he listened to me, and after I could explain it to him. But anyways, that's kind of where I get a little bit of awareness versus proficient. Anyways.
That's a fantastic example.
Yes. And my story was just, I had, this patient, my team sends me kind of the difficult cases and stuff when we're managing warfarin. And I had the most amazing plan for this patient's warfarin therapy. I mean, I had dug into all the hows and wheres and what fors and whys and theories and things. And what about, low dose oral vitamin K? And, we can get all these things going for this patient. And I had the perfect plan. And I was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You got it? Yes, we got it. Patient and I are on the same page. It was green light, go. And I get back to see her again the next week, and she's like, oh yeah, I ran out of my med, and then so I missed a day or two. And I was just like, how could you ruin my perfect plan? And I found myself a little frustrated that how dare her not implement, what was going to be the brilliant moment of my, entire month-long management system. And she just that's when I was like, okay, they're doing the best they can. Just give them some grace and let's move on with the day. But the frustration part was definitely there. I mean, I wasn't necessarily like frustrated at her, just at the situation, but it's like, you got to just, we're dealing with the human factor there, and humans are messy. And so I just remember laughing when you said people are often frustrated by that. That's the first thing that popped into my mind.
So you have experienced frustration.
I have, yes.
So, I think this is such an important thing, because, how many of our colleagues out there have experienced this frustration? You know,
All of
they all have. We all have at some point. I remember talking to a guy who was going to serve on my team, and as we were having this conversation, we were interrupted by one of his technicians who presented because there was a customer or a patient who had a question, and asked the question. He resolved it, and when the technician walked away, he just rolled his eyes and he said, "I can't get anybody to do what I want them to do." And he was voicing frustration. And I think by being equipped with a model, and this is a model, you can probably find other models out there, but I found this one to be so helpful to be able to look and say, okay, where are people at in this? And I'm going to give you a phrase, for our listeners or watchers, however it is that you're consuming this content. You may want to write this down, because this is a phrase that I've used. I actually get quoted on it now. It's sort of fun. It's a phrase that I think I stole this from Darren Hardy. But the phrase is this: people need to be reminded more than they need to be taught. People need to be reminded more than they need to be taught. Because if you think about that learning process, how do you go from awareness to proficiency? How do you go from proficiency, that's easy for me to say, or from awareness to competence, and competence to proficiency? How do you do that? Generally speaking, it's time and repetition, time and repetition, time and repetition, time and repetition. Occasionally, you may have some unicorn that you tell them once and everything's fine, and the heavens open, and the light shines down, and you can hear the glorious music. But that's not typically what I've encountered. And so I just think that I think if we can equip people with that perspective, it can help. And it applies everywhere. It applies at home. It applies with your kids. It applies with training your dog. It applies with dealing with your coworkers. It applies with dealing with your neighbors. It applies to dealing with your family, right? For those of our colleagues out there who are involved in political advocacy, you're going to have to go time and time and time again. It's not that, hey, I sent one letter to my congressman, I'm going to expect everything to go right. No, it's going to take time and repetition, because you have to help somebody go from a place of not being aware to being aware, to being proficient, or to being competent, and then ultimately to be proficient with understanding what's going on.
So many lessons there, Jess, and it's not even just for our patients, it's for ourselves too, right? And even launching programs like this, it's like we've seen the frustration, and we've been the frustrated ones, where it's like, we just want people to know this material, right? And it goes, and it goes to all these marketing agencies saying you gotta see something like 8 times before you go in and bite, go in and click, whatever it is, purchase whatever, right? And it's the same thing for learning, I guess. It's just gotta get through these thick skulls. Or I speak for myself. Sorry, Dina. My thick skull takes a lot of time and repetition, right?
Same.
Well, I'll echo. I know that Sean does have a thick skull.
Yeah, I was. So I kind of want to move us into this next kind of observation here along these exact same lines about, we can kind of take these concepts and start trying to figure out like where our patients or our team or ourselves or our coworkers might be along the process of the 4 steps. But as you said, it doesn't, being aware doesn't equal, I'm still trying to master my favorite souffle, and it's not happened yet, but I'm hopeful that it will. But how do you know when you get there? Like, how do I know, I'm aware that I don't make a very good souffle right now. I'm hoping one day to be competent at it, but how will I know when I've arrived versus how will I know when I move to the next step of proficiency? And not so much, that's probably a silly example, but just to kind of realize, what are we looking for, and kind of, how do we dissect that down a little bit more so we kind of know where people are?
Yeah, I think if we take a moment here to look at a separate learning model, and this is the mastery model. There's and so I'll share this with you, and I think we have enough time here that we can do this today. But there's 4 levels to mastery, as well. And the lowest level is that you are an unconscious incompetent, right? And that's another fancy way of saying you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're not good at. But you can move from that level to being a conscious incompetent. You can know that something exists, but you don't necessarily, or you're not necessarily any good at it. But with time and repetition, you can get yourself to the place of conscious competence. I often use the example of brushing your teeth. Right, there was a time where people didn't know how to brush their teeth. Right, they didn't even know it was a thing. There was an unconscious incompetence. They didn't know how to do it. Now you become aware. You become conscious that you don't know how to brush your teeth, or you're doing this with your kids, right? And at least with my kids, you'd put a little bit of toothpaste on the toothbrush, and the kid would, eat the toothpaste off the toothbrush because it tasted good, right? But what do you have to do? You had to work with them, and it took that time and it took that repetition to get through it. And if you do that long enough, and everybody's different on this, but you can get to this level 3, which is to be a conscious competent. Right. You're, and, I would encourage you can even test this out yourself. I would suspect that most of us, on this, listening to this program today, probably brush our teeth with the same hand. Like, you either use your right hand, you use your left hand, and you do it automatically now. Right? It's because you've actually gone to level 4. You've become an unconscious competent. You can do this. You can brush your teeth with the lights off, your eyes closed, whatever. You can do that. But if you want to just sort of disrupt the learning model here, try brushing your teeth with the other hand. And you'll find that muscle memory isn't there. That muscle memory is a little awkward. I would also suggest this. Have you ever, crossed your arms across your chest? You probably have a standard way that you do that. Now just reverse it. Like, how awkward does that feel? I see you. Sean, how's that feel?
It feels a little
it's weird.
It's a weird thing, right? Now it's not necessarily wrong. You can probably find people that cross right over left or left over right, however it is. But you recognize that you can get to the point where that feels really, really comfortable. And how is it? It's because you've done it time and time and time again. And if I said cross your arms, you do it automatically. You don't even have to tell. I don't have to give you any instruction. Lift this arm up, that arm up. You do it automatically. It's because you have an unconscious competence about it. And I think those, that's a similar model. But I think if you take these two models, these can so inform you, and they can give you such a perspective, right, around how you lead yourself, how you lead your team, how you lead your patients, all those things. I think that gives you, and maybe I'll just speak for myself. I know that has given me an extra dose of patience, an extra dose of perspective. It's also given me an extra dose of encouragement to say, you know what, maybe there's things that I need to learn to do better. Maybe I'm not giving instructions as well as I thought I was. And it sort of brings me back down to earth and say, okay, if you're going to serve these people well, and again, everybody deserves to be led well. If you're going to serve them well, maybe I need to develop maybe I need to add things to my toolbox. Maybe I need to get things in my bag of tricks to be able to be more effective in being able to educate people and help them go from where they are to some better place.
It's a great lesson, Jess.
Yeah.
And we just need maybe we can learn to unpack that a little bit more on another episode, because I think that there's a lot there that I think we can learn, and how, other than just time and repetition, right? Like, how do you go through all those levels? I think.
Yeah, I agree. That I think that I would be interested to see how you progress through the thing, through the levels there, mastery, getting to where we're going. What else do we have today?
Well, when we sat down to do this, Sean gave us a very strict timeline. He said we cannot go over like 25 minutes.
Look
And
how good we're doing.
looks like we're starting to flirt with that. So I think this may be a decent place for us to stop today. I hope that I trust that we've found something that we've delivered some value to you, the listener, the viewer today, that we have helped you maybe see things in a way that you hadn't considered before. I know I hadn't considered this. I was well into my 40s before these models were presented to me, and it was, these were very eye-opening models to consider. And it made so much sense, especially as I look backwards throughout my career and I say, oh, you know what? I was doing things thinking that by moving somebody from ignorance to awareness, that I automatically had the expectation that they would operate at a level of proficiency. I automatically thought if I made them, if I took them from being an unconscious incompetent, if I made them conscious of it, that they would somehow become an unconscious competent with it. And the models just help us unpack that in a different way that I think can be so helpful and so empowering, right?
Yeah.
Because if we have that, I think it allows us to just to engage people in a much better and more impactful way.
I mean, one thing I love about all these lessons, Jess, is, and it kind of hit me when Dina was talking about her experience at the cardiovascular clinic, right? And I'm like, well, that's some really great clinical, like, experience, knowledge there, way above and beyond what I have. But I just think about all of our pharmacist colleagues, how wicked smart they are, all this clinical data and stuff they have locked in their mind. But when we're talking about things like this, they may seem elementary or simple, but it's like, wait a second, well, why do we fail time and time again? Why do we still have confused patients, right? So I think this is it kind of hit me as you were both talking. I'm like, wait a second, like that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this, because yes, we may be in a class of really smart people, but it's like going to these people who don't know. Like, that's one of our biggest faults, is we assume that people are so smart and they know all these things, right? Because it's second nature to us because of the 4 years we spent in pharmacy school. Or whatever it was, right? So anyway, sorry, that was just kind of a long rant, but
I think you bring up a good point that we say we've spent 4 years in pharmacy school. Many of us have spent a boatload of money to be at that place, and we kind of expect that at the end of it, we should have some of these things sort of automatically. And my experience is that we don't. That these are skills that we have to learn, that we have to develop. I think having a framework becomes so helpful. And when it comes down to it, there's so much of what we do. And I think this fills Dina's example here. It's not just about knowledge. It's about building competence. It's how do you help somebody build the behaviors that are going to serve them well. Right. It's not about, well, hey, they have the medicine and hey, they know they're supposed to take it. I spent a lot of years working in the adherence space, and there was a big part of it where I thought, if I could just give people enough knowledge, they're going to do everything correctly. And that is unfortunately not completely true. There's some people that they can have the knowledge, but you really have to work with them to help them develop the systems to be able to become, to become competent, to become proficient. You have to help people get to those levels, and everybody's different. You might have to, somebody that works the night shift is different than somebody that works the day shift, right? They have different routines that you have to help them plug into to be successful.
Yeah, I love it.
Stuff, Jess.
All right. Well, with that, we'd like to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. We do have some exciting things coming soon. We're going to have the 4 Pillars of Leadership Masterclass at the special introductory rate of free. So be sure you don't miss that. There's also lots of resources and a supportive community of pharmacists. And you can find all of that over at RPH Ally. So be sure to head over there and sign up for that. You can also find Jesse and Sean and myself over on LinkedIn. We would love to connect with you there as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. In the meantime, keep leading your teams with confidence from the boardroom to the break room. And we'll see you next time on the Leadership Lab.
All right. Thank you.